All right, welcome everybody to Poetry Discussion with Maria and Kirk. Today we are going to start a new, hopefully a series or just a couple of poems, nothing that we have to do every week or anything like that, but we are trying to fill this art slot that Razi is giving us on Tuesdays. Every Tuesday we're gonna have an art show of some sort. One of them we thought would be great would be poetry readings and discussions. And to start us with this long-term journey into poetry, I thought I would start us with poems, or the poems that got me going. So I had always hated poetry, and Maria, I'd actually like to ask you this question. So I hated poetry, even though I read a lot of literature growing up. I hated poetry until I was like 27 years old because of one lecture that I heard. And then now, I'm 36. Now I love poetry. It's pretty much the literature I read the most. Well, not quite, but it's a literature I read a lot. But what was your relationship with poetry, just out of curiosity?
Yeah. So I studied English literature back in school, and we had this sort of like really long anthology of poetry. But I always felt like anything you did in school, especially literature, was really lost because you were forced to study because you had to sit the exams and pass the tests and then get a good grade. So I feel like it was never really done for pleasure, even though we read some of the most, famous poetry out there, some of the most profound writing, some of the biggest authors. So yeah, I feel like I did enjoy it as I was doing it, but it was always a little bit reluctant because it was kind of like, I need to get what this author is trying to say. I need to pass my test. I need to analyze it the way that the person who's marking my paper wants me to analyze it. Like, it almost feels like you try to kind of fit into some sort of template. And then I probably for a very long time, for many years, had given up on poetry and then rediscovered it again later in life. So I do think that poetry is probably better saved for when you're a little bit older. I do think that you consume it more consciously, you enjoy it more, and just not having that pressure of being in school and trying to, pass your exams. So I do really, really like poetry.
Yeah.
I love poetry that rhymes. I do think that the sounds just, pleasure wise, I do like that more. So I'm excited for us to go through this one.
Yeah, it'll be fun. And I think, so there's two things I wanted to pick on what you just said that I think are really important is that you did not read it for pleasure when you were younger. You read it because it was part of a test and you had the pressure of the test and doing that. And I think, but reading it for pleasure is really important. And it's something that has been, because at a young age, we're taught, if at all. So in American schools where I'm from, and where were you? Were you educated in England or?
No, I was educated in Cyprus, but it was a British school. So it was a very British curriculum. Yeah.
Yeah. So the Brits definitely have more of an appreciation for the English language and poetry. In America, they do not. We do not have that, unfortunately. It's really tragic because I think that we're missing out on so much. We do, of course, I did, going into public school growing up, I did get some poetry, but it was horrific the way they taught it. I don't remember any of it. I think it was probably even worse than how you experienced it, where it's like the teacher was like, all right, we're going to do some Shakespeare. It's like, here's a piece of Shakespeare. He was born in 15, whatever. And, died at this age, and he's married to this person, and this king was in here, and then oh yeah, here's a line he said, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? I don't know what it means. Try to memorize it. Okay, let's move on to history, right? Like that's how it was basically done. It was like something you had to do. It's like, oh, here it comes again, some stupid. Even the teachers didn't like it. It was just like so ridiculous, and it just but it decouples even your experience. Decouples the whole purpose, I think, of and the wonder of poetry, which is pleasure. And I think you choosing that word is great because I stress that all the time. Pleasure, pleasure, pleasure. I'm a pleasure-seeking fiend, and poetry is very pleasurable. And it's just ridiculous the way that we've decoupled that from poetry. Now, having said that, because of your experience and my experience and you, the reader's experience, more than likely, the reality is that it has been decoupled. So the first thing we have to do is couple it, to use another metaphor of sorts, and get it together, get pleasure with poetry. And you should be thinking about it. And there's a course or a 2-lecture series that did this for me. That is Leonard Peikoff's Poems I Like and Why, where he doesn't go into academic, discussions, which even I tend to do sometimes. He makes it so approachable. It's all about fun, enjoying it. Like you said, Maria, it's like the rhythm and the rhyme are critical. And he actually has coupled or put those together as essential to poetry, like it's not poetry. I think he has, we could talk about that maybe in more as we go down. I don't want to focus too much on like, why is rhyme important? Why is rhythm important? So I'll just say the way that it really struck with me, and we're going to read some of these poems, or we'll read one poem today, and we'll read some more from this series. So you can go on YouTube. We'll put a link in the in our show. Go watch this course. It's only 3 hours total, but it's Peikoff, who's like the greatest teacher ever. And it's what sparked for me and a lot of people a real passion for poetry. And, so he has this one line, I'll end with this and then we can move on to the next thing, is he has this one line about the essence of poetry is in this Ogden Nash poem, candy is dandy, but liquor is quicker. And that's the essence of it, right? Because that's got rhyme and rhythm. So if you can understand that all the great poems, including the poem we're about to read, that's basically the essence. Candy is dandy, but liquor is quicker, right? That's it. You have the rhyme, you have rhythm, you have concepts. The sound of concepts is critical to what we're going to read with poetry. And we're not going to redo his whole lecture, but we'll talk about his concepts as we go. So Maria, before we move into the poem itself, which I'll tease you guys with is, well, I guess you probably know the title, is Ayn Rand's favorite poem, or it was one of her favorite, one of two that were probably her favorite. There's 2 lines in this poem, and I'm not going to tell you, but see if you guys can guess in the comments below. Like there's 2 lines in this poem that she had engraved on a plaque and put like in her house or in her office. So did you have anything to add before we moved on to the poem, Maria?
No, just to your point where you said the approachability. I think a lot of the time it's difficult for people to consume a lot of art, including poetry, because they think that they need to have some kind of like history of either growing up in a literary family or an artistic family. But the truth is that that's not the case. Don't get overwhelmed by approaching a work of art, approaching a poem. Just read it, enjoy it, and then just dive deeper, line by line. I think that's the best way to do it, and to make it more available to people who maybe have never consumed poetry before.
Yeah. And that's what we're going to do today. And so my recommendation for everybody is always to, 1, read the poem aloud, 2, understand that you're not going to understand it, right? Like that's okay. Just accept that reality that the first time you read it, any great poem, especially great poems, it's very unlikely you're going to understand it right off the bat. So that's okay. So, Maria, you want me to do the reading of this one? You don't want to try it? Would you like to give it a shot?
No, I think you should.
Okay. So I will read The Westerner by Badger Clark. And I think I guess it's Badger Clark. I always forget because I actually wrote that out. So it may be something else, but if you quote, or if you Google The Westerner, Badger Clark, this should pop up. It used to be much more popular than it is today, but okay. So first I'm going to read the poem, and then we're going to go through it, kind of not, we're not going to, not line by line, but we'll read some passages and discuss it. So just sit back and listen. The Westerner. My fathers sleep on the sunrise plains, and each one sleeps alone. Their trails may dim to the grass and rains, for I choose to make my own. I lay proud claim to their blood and name, but I lean on no dead kin. My name is mine for the praise or scorn, and the world began when I was born, and the world is mine to win. They built high towns on their old log sills where the great slow rivers gleamed. But with new live rock from the savage hills, I'll build as they only dreamed. The smoke scarce dies where the trail camp lies, till the rails glint down the pass. The desert springs into fruit and wheat, and I lay the stones of a solid street over yesterday's untrod grass. I waste no thought on my neighbor's birth or the way he makes his prayer. I grant him a white man's room on earth if his game is only square. While he plays it straight, I'll call him mate. If he cheats, I'll drop him flat. Old class and rank are a worn out lie, for all clean men are as good as I, and a king is only that. I dream no dreams of a nursemaid state that will spoon me out my food. A stout heart sings in the fray with fate, and the shock and sweat are good. From noon to noon, all the earthly boon that I ask my God to spare is a little daily bread in store, with the room to fight the strong for more, and the weak shall get their share. The sunrise plains are a tender haze, and the sunset seas are gray. But I stand here where the bright skies blaze over me and the big today. What good to me is a vague maybe, or a mournful might have been, for the sun wheels swift from morn to morn, and the world began when I was born, and the world is mine to win. All right.
Beautiful.
It is a beautiful poem. We'll give all the credit to Badger Clark for a great poem, making it easy to read. But I do enjoy reading that poem. It's a fun one to read. So thank you, Maria, for letting me read it.
My pleasure.
But it is a pleasure to read as well. And I hope it's a pleasure to listen to. So what we're going to do, and I'm gonna let you start because they've been hearing my voice for too long, the listener. So we start off somewhere with this, or actually, what are your first thoughts of, like, when you approach a poem like this? What's the first thing you do?
Well, firstly, I guess there's no surprise that this was Ayn Rand's one of her favorite poems. I think quite early on, there's that element of kind of individuality. A man trying to portray that, his life is his for living, and this world is his to kind of build according to his, values and image of what is right and wrong. So I kind of think that, the first time I read it, there's a lot of nature references,
Mm-hmm.
a lot
Grass
of kind
and
of
rains.
a lot of comparison between the past and the present.
Mm-hmm.
I guess those are kind of I'm assuming kind of the overarching theme here. And I think once we dive into the various lines, that will come through even more. But I actually wanted to ask you, what were the two lines that she had engraved on?
Okay. Well, let's wait. Let's surprise people with that. Do you have an idea of what it might be, just out of your thoughts, before I tell you what they actually are for sure?
I would imagine it's somewhere where it says, sorry, I'm just looking at the poem now.
It's all right.
Like,
think about individualism.
I think it's in the last line. Last paragraph. Like, the world began when I was born, and the world is mine to win. Maybe.
Yeah, that's it. Yep. Yeah. We could talk a little bit more about that, and the world began when I was born, right? So the world begins when you're born. So it's the whole world. So there's a lot of philosophies that like the whole "you didn't build it," they would not
Yeah.
say this, right? Like if you know Obama's phrase, "you didn't build that," the whole idea behind that philosophy is that we are born into this world where other people are working, other people are building the roads and the hospitals and the schools, and you're using the electric grids. You're using that, so you didn't, whatever you build, Maria, whatever you create in your lifetime, you didn't really build it because you're relying on all these other things that other people built. And this philosophy of Badger Clark's The Westerners completely opposite. And the world began when I was born, and the world is mine to win. And let's go into it and dig into the lines. But I think that overarching philosophy of "you did not build that" is the complete opposite and a great counter to the Westerners' philosophy. And it's two philosophies we can look at two poles of "you did not build that" versus the world. The world began when I was born, and the world is mine to win, which is, I think, a beautiful phrase.
Yeah.
So, why don't you read a couple these first couple lines? Right? Why don't you read to here? Let's discuss that so you can get some of the poetry out. So just this first two sentences.
My fathers sleep on the sunrise plains, and each one sleeps alone. Their trails may dim to the grass and rains, for I choose to make my own.
Now,
Shall we stop there? Okay.
No,
let's.
So like, we don't have to do it like sentence by sentence, but I just want to start us off this way. He's setting a tone right at the beginning, right? My fathers sleep on the sunrise plain. He's not, throughout this whole poem, but here, I mean, do you think he has a positive view of his fathers, his forefathers, not his literal fathers or literal father, but the men who came before him, right? Do you think he has a good view of them or a negative view of them?
A good view, I think.
Yeah.
So, and that's what's great about this poem. I think, throughout we do get this references where like he honors the people that came before him. And as we kind of read the poem, this will come through even more. But so, for example, he starts with, my fathers sleep on the sunrise plains. I guess sunrise plains to me is like a reference to like a heaven, maybe.
Yeah.
So the men that came,
that's what I think of, like Elysium, the place of the gods, like it's a heroic heaven. Yeah, I think of it. Yeah. That's how I think of it. The sunrise plains.
Yeah. But even early on, he says, and each one sleeps alone. Again, I think this is like a reference to their individuality.
Yeah.
And then he says, their trails may dim to the grass and rains. So I guess what came before, what they have built, may dim, because the new generation, I, the author, choose to kind of carve out my own path for myself.
Yes. No, I love that. I think that's a great analysis. Yeah.
Yeah. And then to continue, he says, I lay proud claim to their blood and name. So like, I guess I'm proud where I came from. I did. Yep. I am kind of them. I come from these men, but I lean on no dead skin. Like I'm my own man.
Well, hopefully it's maybe skin, not skin.
Sorry, on
hopefully he doesn't. Maybe he lays on some dead skin. A Western. No, I know what you're saying. Yeah.
So I guess what he says is I don't have a claim for the things that maybe they've built, or I'm not going to attach myself too much to my past and the men that came before me.
That's how I take it. Is that second one? Yeah.
Yeah.
Where he's proud to come from these pioneers who came before him. He's proud of that, and he thinks it's a good thing. But he's not going to rest on their successes, right? And say, oh, they succeeded, so I can just kind of drift in their general direction. He's going to say that I'm going to build whatever land, whatever I can in my lifetime.
Yeah.
And he explains why a little bit in this next couple lines, which are the famous ones, right? And here's why he's going to do that. Why he's not going to lean on no dead skin.
No, I was just going to say, I really like that line, like, my name is mine for praise or scorn.
Yeah.
He's kind of, he's saying who I become as a person, whether I'm liked or disliked, whether I'm a person worthy of praise or of scorn. In any case, it's kind of, I will bear that title regardless of the men that came before me. And as you previously mentioned, that's where we, I guess, hear that line for the first time, and the world is mine to win. That's a really
does
great.
This, my name is mine for the praise of scorn, does that make you think of any of Ayn Rand's quotes? Or
I mean, definitely makes me think of Howard Rourke.
Oh, for sure.
I think generally this poem is very synonymous with how he lived his life. And I think even some of the things that he had, I think, said in some of the conversations that he had, because I think as an architect, he did kind of think about people who came before him, the architects that had built before him, and he had respect for them, but he
like
wanted
Cameron.
Yeah, exactly. But he wanted to, he didn't want to follow in their steps. He didn't want to follow in their footsteps in their designs. He didn't want to replicate things, use the same materials that they had used. So yeah, I think it's a very Rourkean poem in many ways.
Oh, for sure. And he says they built high towns. So he's talking about his forefathers, and you could totally apply this to Cameron and the men that Rourke talks about in The Fountainhead, and that he admires that came before him, even if he disagrees or he wants his buildings to be Rourkean, that you could just see it and it's like, this is my building, right? But he's, like of Rourke, you can imagine him saying, he built high towns on his old log sills where the great slow rivers gleamed, but with new live rock from the savage hills, I'll build as they only dream. I mean, that's so Rourkean. I mean, even if you think about the opening of The Fountainhead, right, where he's talking about, he's imagining what he could do to that rock. Remember, he's standing naked on the rock and he's picturing what he could do to that, how he could use tools to break apart that rocks and those rocks and build with it.
Yeah.
And I really that's a great line as well. As so again, I think it's admiring those who came before you, without saying that they did everything and we're nothing, which I think is the, you didn't build it philosophy. It's like, you're nothing. And the community is everything. And he's like, no, right.
I really like those three lines. I like, I like the reference to natural elements. He mentions the old log sills. So you're imagining wood, slow rivers, where slow rivers gleamed, and then kind of the juxtaposition of the old log sills with the live rock. Yeah, I think that's great. And I think it paints this image of, the people who came before us, they built to the best of their ability at that time, but we're moving along, and there's, we need to embrace progress. And I like the comparison of the wood and the rock. We will build better, stronger in this generation. So yeah.
And it's a perfect, again, more, I mean, I don't know when Ayn Rand read this. I'd be very curious if it was before, because this was written before The Fountainhead. But just the idea, like Howard Rourke exactly talks about this when he's talking to the dean, right? Like, you never should use a material for the same thing you used another material for, right? Like, so if you have this new kind of aluminum, you should build with that. You should build a different way than you did with marble, right? He makes that analogy to the Parthenon when he talks to the dean, and it seems very similar to here. Like, they built their high towns on old log sills, and he's like, so he's talking about log, but I'm going to build on this with rock, right? And I'm going to master rock where they mastered logs, and I'll build stuff that they couldn't even dream of.
Yeah.
And then let's keep going. You want to keep going?
Sure. The smoke scarce dies where the trail camp lies, till the rails glint down the pass. The desert springs into fruit and wheat, and I lay the stones of a solid street over yesterday's untrod grass.
Yeah. So what do you think? Go ahead.
So the first two lines, I'm having a little bit of difficulty dissecting.
Right here?
The smoke scarce dies where the trail camp lies, till the rails glint down the pass.
What do you think he means by rails? What rails?
The railway?
Probably the thing you were on earlier today, you said on the train. Right? Right.
That's true. I was on a train earlier.
On a train earlier, right? So that's what I imagine he's talking about, right? So again, he's talking about his forefathers more, right? The smoke scarce dies where the trail camp lies till the rails glint down the pass. That's like I think that's part of the world they built, that he admires. And it's, it's in the past. It's, the smoke is dying away, but the desert springs into fruit and wheat, and I lay the stones of a solid street over yesterday's untrod grass. And if you remember earlier, he talks about that a little bit, their trails may dim the grass and rains, for I choose to make my own. So this is, again, just hammering away that theme that, he's not saying what they built will die, but he's saying it may die because I'm going to build what I want to build. So I'm not going to focus on what they built. I'm going to do my own thing. And so maybe I'll build on what they did or maybe not, but I'm going to build my own thing. That's why I think the word may is very important. He's not saying everything they built will go to pot, but to use, I think, a more British term, but we don't really use that term in America. Just to pot. So anyway,
no, but
that's what I think.
Not sorry, no, yeah, like you said, like now that you mentioned it, it does make more sense. And I guess he's kind of trying to maybe explain to the reader that I'm not kind of on this like war path with the people before me. I'm not saying that I want to undo everything and all the effort that they have done, but I will lay stones of a solid street, if that's kind of, the right way to go over yesterday's untrod grass. I like that line a lot. I think maybe he's saying, I will go where my ancestors didn't venture. And
I think, like, if you think about another philosophy like Nietzsche or the Übermensch, right? Like that might go too far in the sense of, to hell with everything in the past. I'm going to build a whole new world. I'm going to trample over everybody. I'm going to do whatever I want at your expense, and everybody who came before me and everything that they built. That's not what he's saying, right? Like he's just saying, so again, that's why I think it's a great poem, and it makes sense that it's Ayn Rand's favorite, is it has a good tug, or, it's a good, counterpoint to these two views of egoism and, you're going to trample over everybody if you're an egoist, or you're going to, be in a communist society where everybody builds everything and you're just kind of a cog in a wheel. He's like, no. I'm neither of those. It's a false alternative. I'm going to admire the people who are, I'm going to admire before me, and I'm going to build something that's totally me. Now this next one is very controversial. I think that's why this poem is definitely not loved anymore. It's a part of a series of poems of this era that has this kind of idea, and you can read this a lot in Kipling, for instance. I'll say it so you don't have to say it. I grant him a white man's room on earth if his game is only square. While he plays it straight, I'll call him mate. If he cheats, I drop him flat. Now, do you want to venture an idea on that, or do you want me to do that? I don't know. It's pretty controversial to say. A white man's
so when I
room.
first read it, I did get that sense, but then I kind of started to sort of take it apart. And I'll start from the top where he says, I waste no thought on my neighbor's birth. I think he's saying, I don't care where my neighbor comes from. I'm not going to judge you by.
I missed that one. Thank you.
Yeah, by where you were born. Or the way he makes his prayers. So I'm not going to discriminate against anyone based on their religious affiliations, maybe. And that next line, which is probably the controversial one, I grant him a white man's room on earth. I think we need to bear in mind the time at which it was written. So I'm guessing he, as a white man on earth, had a pretty comfortable life. So I guess what he's trying to say is, I will treat you as my own and make your life good as a white man's life is, if your game is only square. So I don't know if it's as controversial as it sounds. I think the word,
I don't think it has to be.
It's triggering, but I guess all he's saying is, if you're an honest man, I will treat you, and I will, I will make your life comfortable, as mine is, regardless of where you come from, your birth, your religious affiliations. But you need to be honest. Your game has to be square.
Yeah. Now, to be fair, I just want to point out, the counter to this, what people will something will say is that the problem is the equating a white man or the whiteness of a person to things like, being fair, being honest, and things of that nature, and goodness.
Oh, I see.
And that it's that kind of connection that people will have a problem with. Now, the I don't think it's an issue personally. I think what he's saying is that this is an author who's white, and it's Westerners coming from Europe, and he's saying, I don't care what your color of your skin is. I don't care who you pray to. I don't care where you were born. Right? As long as you play the game straight, I'll call you a friend. Wherever you're born, whatever you look like, whoever you pray to, I don't care. But you have to play by this one rule, which is to play fair, honest, and don't cheat. Otherwise, I'll drop you flat, no matter who you are.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of ways to read, the white man's room on Earth. I think it's part of the era. I don't think it's good to have the focus on the color of skin.
Yeah.
I don't think that's correct. But like you said, I think given the time, and again, it was factually a lot of Europeans in the 19th century who came to America, which this is referring to, right? This is a Westerner, which is a person who left Europe to come to America to build the West and to move west. And they were generally white, but not always. So it's a tricky one. It's not my favorite. I don't think it should focus on color, but anyway, so let's move on from that. I just wanted to point that out so people will not accuse me of skipping it. All right, so you want to keep going?
Let's finish that one where he says, while he plays it straight, I'll call him mate. If he cheats, I'll drop him flat. Old class and rank are a worn out lie, for all clean men are as good as I, and the king is only that. So I guess he continued, just a continuation of his thought earlier, if you cheat me, I would drop you flat. I guess he's saying, class and rank, that doesn't matter. And I think now that's actually makes more sense, him coming from Europe to America. Obviously, Europe was very feudal at the time.
Maybe a little bit still is.
Yeah, still had monarchy.
Still has those dang monarchs.
And still has those things, exactly. But he's saying none of that matters. A king, whether you're a king or a pauper, I guess. There's probably another controversial line in there, which for all clean men are as good as I.
What's
but again,
clean?
So what's clean? But I guess again, maybe he's only saying, if you're good like I am, I will. I'm assuming he considers himself to be a good man. So I guess maybe that's just a
this is like the ideal man. The Westerner is like what is the ideal individualist, an egoist in a sense. Right. And anybody who strives for that is as good as he is, if they're honest and clean. And it doesn't matter if who you pray to. It doesn't matter where you were born. It doesn't matter if you were born a king. It doesn't matter if you were born in a high class or low class. Right. So again, it's the new world philosophy where it's like you leave all that stuff behind. You leave birth, race, religion, class, whatever, king, like royalty behind. And you are an individual human and I'm an individual human and we're equal. So long as you act honestly and like with integrity.
With integrity.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move on a little bit. I dream no dreams of a nursemaid state that will spoon me out my food. A stout heart sings in the fray with fate, and the shock and sweat are good. From noon to noon, all the earthly boon that I ask my God to spare is a little daily bread in store, with the room to fight the strong for more, and the weak shall get their share. Okay, so I'm trying to speed it up a little bit.
Sure.
So the nursemaid state thing, right? That's pretty clear, right? This is the welfare state.
Yeah.
Like that kind of thing, or just any kind of state that will take care of you. And he doesn't want that, right?
No.
He doesn't want to have his food given to him by the royalty or the state. All he cares about is what? What is the one virtue that he is admiring? Stout
Well,
heart.
to be, I guess, to have the freedom to achieve more. So I
Okay,
think,
freedom. Yeah.
well, so I guess a little daily bread in store, like as long as I have kind of maybe the food to get me going and the room to fight the strong for more. So the room to fight is the freedom. This is how I interpreted it.
Yeah.
That I won't be kind of, restricted, the room to fight, as long as I can have my freedom and my liberty, to fight the strong for more. That's what I picked up. And and the shock and sweat are good. Again, I guess that's a reference to kind of, he doesn't shy away from maybe hard work or hardship.
Yeah.
I don't need the state to give me anything. I'm willing to work for my daily bread in store, and I want to have my liberty to fight for more.
Yes.
No?
No. I think freedom is the value of the Westerner. That's one of the deepest values, is having the freedom to do what you want. And I think, he's saying in terms of the character of the Westerner, he's saying, I take the stout heart is what I picked up, at the beginning, right? And I like the word sings, right? A stout heart that sings. So there's a pleasure in the fighting. There's a pleasure in ripping up the dirt to grow crops, or breaking apart rocks to make a building. Like the difficulty of it is what he enjoys, and all he asks is that there is some fruit at the end of that, which he thinks there will be, and that's what I think is the reference to the daily bread that he can store. And then there's going to be some fights, and it's not going to be an easy world in this Westerner, and he's even giving a little bread kind of throw out to, the weak people they'll get their own. Like they can rely on me. I'll do it as long as they don't get in my way. That's kind of how I read the weak shall get their share. Not necessarily charity, but that there are weak. It's an acknowledgement that there are not everybody's like him.
Yeah.
Right? Not everybody's Howard Roark. Not everybody's John Galt, but everybody will benefit from them, and they'll get what they deserve.
Their fair share. Okay.
That's how I take that. Okay, last, how about you finish us off here?
Okay. The sunrise plains are a tender haze, and the sunset seas are gray. But I stand here where the bright skies blaze over me and the big today. What good to me is a vague maybe, or a mournful might have been. For the sun wheels swift from morn to morn, and the world began when I was born, and the world is mine to win.
Woo! All right.
Beautiful.
So it's pretty clear what he's saying to some degree, right? He doesn't he doesn't like, because I'm this way too. I put on a lot of events in Austin now, and the damn vague maybes I get all the time. Like, maybe I'll go. It's like, just say yes or no. Just tell me no. I respect you if you just tell me no. If you say maybe, I'm like, oh God, leave me alone. I'm not going to invite you anywhere. And I love that line. What good to me is a vague maybe, because you can't act, right? Like if Maria gives me a maybe, I can't do anything with that. What am I supposed to do? That's so non-committal. Just say, Kirk, go away. And I'll be like, all right, at least I know what to do. I can act, right? Like, all right, you gave me a committal. The same thing with the mournful might have been, like people who dwell on, what might have been, we could have done. It's like, who cares? Focus on the future, right? Go for it. So that's what there's a lot in there that I like, but I really love those two lines at the end. What about you?
So I do love what good to me is a vague maybe and a mournful might have been. Again, I think it sometimes you can't relate to poetry if it was written 150 years ago. People feel like, what reference does it have to me? But that is something I feel like anyone can relate to, because like you said, we've all come across people that are not committal. They throw these maybes and might have beens at us. So I think that really kind of modernizes it in many ways, and also just shows to us that the issues that people had 150 years ago, whenever this poem was written, they're exactly the same things that we're dealing with today. So I think that it's great for the reader to relate to the author. But I also really like the beginning where he refers to the sunrise plains again. So it kind of brings the beginning to his final lines. And again, that comparison between, where his ancestors are, that's in the past. Whatever happened with them is but a haze, maybe a distant memory. But what I have today in the now are these bright skies that blaze. And I love that comparison. The present is here, the skies are bright. So kind of like, seize it. And then he finishes it off with the world began when I was born and the world is mine to win.
Mhm.
So the bright skies are hanging above you, and your life is yours for the making.
Yeah. Yeah. And it, like you said, I think at the beginning of our discussion, it has a wonderful intermixture of what's the word? Like nature imagery.
Mhm.
But it's not nature imagery overshadowing man. It's nature imagery conquered by man and in relation to what he's able to accomplish. Like the
Yeah.
reality of the world that we're born into. Like the world began when I was born, and this whole world is here. But he's gonna rip up the live rock just like or Savage Hill, in the Savage Hills, just like his forefathers, on a gleaming river built towns, high towns. So he has these great things. And I think, but I stand here where the bright skies blaze. And, that's like the noon to noon, the heat of the workday, I think is what he's talking about. So this is a paean to hard work, sweating in the work and getting it done, and getting up every morning, Monday through Sunday, and working 7 days a week. We were kind of joking before the show about working 7 days a week. And this guy's like, yes, every day from morn to morn, and or the sun wheels swift from morn to morn. Time goes by fast. We're only here for a little bit, and it's going to go by fast. And this is my song to that. Great. So I think a poem about individuality and egoism, like doing it for yourself, but again, contrasted with, Nietzscheism or the Ubermensch of just stomping on everybody, or the you didn't build that mentality. This is like a proper objectivist philosophy. Not, I don't know if it's 100%. I wouldn't say that this is like the objectivist statement, but it's definitely powerful in that sense of giving us a good image of what that looks like in a very concise place, right? The Fountainhead's a big book. You need that whole book to kind of really understand how it works. But here we get a sense of him, and that's the power of poetry, right? Maybe this is the ending we can have on this, is like the power of poetry is concise, right? It's getting the sound of concepts and putting them to like a tight little package that you can often remember, right? Like these last, and you can have on your wall, and the world began when I was born and the world is mine to win. And all the emotion of this whole poem, a lot of the emotion of the Fountainhead, all can come to you from two words. Like, yeah, the world is mine when I was, began when I was born, and the world is mine to win. What do you think?
Absolutely. He managed to convey in a very relatively short poem what it took Ayn Rand to convey in a very long novel. Now, of course, this is no criticism of the Fountainhead, but like you said, it is the power of poetry, power of language. You can condense so much meaning into, but a few lines.
Yeah.
So, and I guess, I did start the episode by saying, poetry, when you read it in school, it's often kind of like lost on the young, but I do wish that young people would read poetry, because I think as a young impressionable person where you're just trying to figure out your life, if you're reading a poem like this, I think it really fills you with this like passion, like my life is mine for the making. And I'll pay respects to the people who came before me, but I'm gonna seize the day.
Yeah. And I think I didn't mention this earlier, but even though it's true that there's some poems that young kids are not going to be able to understand, I think if you start with the poems they can understand, right? Like there are children's poetry books that I recommend to people that are very useful. And what it does is it helps develop a lifelong love of experiencing these things, right? So Ogden Nash is a fun one to start with for kids, or for young kids. And there's a lot of great poems that you could start with. I mean, and they help you with remembering, like as you grow, you can keep this up and you can keep enjoying, and then you can get to more and more complex poems. So this is, we started with a pretty complex poem. This is not the least complex of all the poems. It's pretty complex. But we hope that you guys will keep going, keep listening, so we can explore some of these poetry, and kind of understand them and connect with them. And maybe you'll find a poem you like as well. So, okay, anything else before we go, Maria?
No, you said it all. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on. This was fun. We will do it again.